Okay. And I did want to give one technical note. Oh, also, you should be able to see my screen. If you do not see my screen, could you please just put a note there so we can get that resolved? And I did just want to make one technical note, which is why, while we are talking about a web-based course today, I am going to be walking you through very detailed screenshots, just because I have learned that if you rely on an internet connection for a presentation like this, it will undoubtedly go down. So it's best to just walk through something that you know will exist. But if you would like to sort of navigate on your own through the web modules, you either have the link from the newsletter that led you to this presentation, or you will see it shortly. So what does teachers say is their biggest challenge, ranked even higher than maintaining order and discipline? And actually, of all their responsibilities, it's the area in which they say they feel the least prepared. It's actually family engagement. Many people think it's classroom management or other things, but in fact, on national surveys, and reinforced by the survey we did for this project, it was family engagement. And in fact, in schools with the majority of low-income students, this number jumps from 31% to 40%. But the good news is that family engagement matters to both teachers and students. 98% of teachers said they believed that teachers need to be able to work well with parents, and 76% of students who said a K-5 teacher made a difference in their life said this teacher knew about their life outside of school. So why does this matter, or where did this lead us? In 2014, CAEP received a grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation with the broad charge to better prepare teachers to work with families. So we were able, with this grant, to convene 7 EPPs in 3 states. And we decided to focus on the foundational skills of parent-teacher communication, because these are skills that all teachers will need and are not learning in the vast majority of their teacher preparation programs. They're also skills upon which more advanced content can be scaffolded. We found that 74% of respondents in our survey of these programs said that they had 0 courses primarily dedicated to family engagement, and 63% responded their professors incorporated these strategies into their courses either never or only once per quarter or semester. And these numbers were exactly in line with national norms. So it wasn't just these EPPs in which they weren't receiving this content. These numbers were in line with the national norm. And in fact, when candidates were learning something, they were learning very basic messages. They were learning very basic strategies. If they were learning anything at all, they were learning what you may have heard of as a sandwich method. So they were learning to say something positive, kind of sneak in the bad news or the difficult and challenging news, and then end with something positive. And that was basically all they were learning, if in fact they were learning anything at all. So for the pilot, we did 2 projects. We did a parent-teacher phone call that included live practice and a parent-teacher conferences. Both projects emphasized proactive, positive communication to build strong relationships with families, and they taught candidates to view families as assets. And that was really the foundation, was that both of these projects were ways to teach candidates to build these strong relationships, and that was the foundational aspect. So in 2015 and 16, we did this project, and then in 16 and 17, due to the success of the pilot, we worked on and then rolled out the permanent modules that you see today. This is just some brief information on the participant overview. Let me see if there's a question. Okay, I don't think so. If you are in fact asking a question that needs to be answered right now, could you please re-enter it? It looks like something popped up and then disappeared. We collected data at each stage, including surveys, student works, focus groups, as well as feedback from the professors who administered this. And then due to the success of the 1-year pilot, we actually decided to roll out the content as the free modules that are now available on the web-based format for all EPPs. This is now available as the course with the 3 modules. One is the importance of family engagement, One is making an initial phone call home, and one is parent-teacher conferences. There's also the accompanying faculty resources that include resources for training and working with practice parents that accompanies the phone call module, and a handbook for walking through the entire course. And this is a landing site when you go to the original page, as well as the URL for the student-facing course. So if you didn't already have that URL and you would like to follow along with the rest of the presentation where we're going to walk through the modules, you can go to that URL now, www.caepfamilyengagement.org, and it is best to use Chrome. Also, as a note, this is not tablet compatible, so you do need a laptop or desktop computer. Just pause for one moment there in case you want to jot that down or navigate to that URL. Okay. So as I've already mentioned, this is the philosophy on which this course, just like the pilot, was built. And it's really about forming relationships. That your first contact with a parent should never be to deliver bad news, that really you should be forming a long-term existing relationship with that family. And we use that phone call exercise as a way to establish that relationship. I'm going to go relatively quickly through the philosophy aspect, and we can circle back to this because I really want to get to probably the reason you're all here, which is to see the course, see the modules, and learn how you can incorporate that. But I do think it's important to note that this was based on the theory of active learning, or pedagogies of enactment, that candidates really need skills beyond academic knowledge, and that much of the development of skills is left to field experience. And this is actually the aspect over which teacher educators have the least control. So bringing these active learning experiences into the classroom, the university classroom, and bringing them earlier than, let's say junior or senior year is really important to giving candidates this active learning experience and giving them skills beyond academic knowledge. Candidates also need more opportunities to practice and receive immediate feedback and to, quote, explore conditions of uncertainty. And this is based a lot on the work of Grossman and McDonald. As you're going to see shortly, the modules incorporate 7 elements of highly effective parent-teacher conferences. And this is adapted from Walker and Dodger. So there are other formulas for having an effective conversation. This is the one we use. But you'll see here that these are relatively common steps. Warm welcome, share information, gather information, establish a plan, etc. But you may be surprised to find that over 65% of students forgot to introduce themselves, or the warm welcome. So having that as an established step is actually really important to remind students that that's something that's actually very critical to do. To say, I'm Johnny's teacher, Ms. Smith. I'm calling today because. Something as simple as that is actually very important to remind students to do, to have as an actual step. So now I'm going to speak about the family engagement module, but I just want to make a note here. So I'm going to talk about them in the order that they appear on the home screen, on the landing screen. But if you are doing the parent phone call modules, you would actually pause and not do the family engagement module in this order. So just make a note of that for right now, and we'll circle back to that. So here's the family engagement module. It starts with exploring why family engagement matters. It explores this with some exercises for them to potentially uncover any bias they may have. And then it gives the perspective of the importance of family engagement from parents, from teachers, and from teacher education faculty. Here's a look at that at one of the first exercises that does some of that uncovering of bias. It asks them to think about what a family that cares about education looks like and to jot down some phrases and words that come to mind. And this actually came out of the pilot where we did a survey that asked this question and found that the majority of candidates responded saying that a family that cared about family engagement was a 2-parent family that lived in the suburbs, these sort of more traditional or stereotypical images. So this gives them an opportunity to do this in their own words, and then gives faculty an opportunity to really explore this. What are your candidates saying about this? Are there areas where you need to delve further, do additional class discussion, additional readings. Here there are videos. You see the woman in the blue dress. She's a parent in an urban public school district talking about the importance of family engagement to her and her child and family. Up at the top and the right-hand side, you see a video about teachers talking about it to their own practice. And then here you see those elements, the 7 elements I had mentioned, students learning this content. So they learn it both through text and through video up at the top. So the modules also hit multiple learning styles. There's text, there's video, there's interactive activities, quizzes, things like this. And just to make a note, the video content does have either closed captioning or transcripts, so students who might have hearing disabilities or things like that are able to get that content. Next is the practice parent phone call module, and I had just said that if you're doing this module, you would do the order slightly differently. And that's because the practice parent phone call module includes live practice. So the order for this is to do a practice phone call with a parent, a trained volunteer first. So if you're doing this module, the very first step is this practice phone call. That's before any content through the online system, including the family engagement overview. And a detailed description of this order is in the faculty handbook. So you don't have to sort of furiously write this down now or be trying to follow this from this webinar. But I think it's important to just make a note, kind of make an asterisk, that the order does change based on the practice phone call module. And it is highly, highly suggested that you do follow this order because the pilot showed that it was far and away the more effective order, but understanding that people will have different limitations and different sort of sets of resources, we did want to set it up so that there could be a seamless order if you could only do the web-based order. So now I'm going to go through the sort of ideal order, which would be if you start with the live practice phone call, then you would do the family engagement overview, and then you would continue with the phone call module. Again, all of this is laid out in the handbook, so you can see it there written out for you. The reason for doing it in this way is that the online modules were most effective when coupled with live practice. Other forms of practice, such as partner practice, were not as effective. The majority of participants reported that the phone calls were, quote, very realistic and, quote, felt like a real scenario. Making the phone calls before the training forced them to pay attention to their training and reflect on their own performance. So an example of this is if you remember those 7 elements, the first one is warm welcome and starts with introduce yourself. And this is a seemingly very simple thing. And candidates said, you know, if I had been presented that in a lesson or a piece of content, I would dismiss it because it's so simple. You know, you're going to sit here in class and tell me, start by introducing yourself. And I would have been, yeah, of course, I'm not going to forget to introduce myself. But they said, when I had just gone through the experience of doing the phone call and had in fact forgotten to do that, and if you remember, more than 65% fell into that group, they said all of a sudden I had to pay attention. They said, you know, it was the jolt to make me pay attention because I had just had that experience. So because this is, you know, on paper, a seemingly simple formula, doing the practice first really gets them to pay attention and to note the ways in which, while something may seem simple, it actually isn't. And, you know, there were some other things. They liked having to figure it out on their own. They said anxiety was a charge. So there were several reasons for doing the phone calls first, including sort of getting them to do practice to get them to pay attention to something that may seem slightly simple, and also getting them just sort of thrust into a practice that they're not very familiar with. Many of them don't even make phone calls anymore and are somewhat unfamiliar or uncomfortable with this. So just getting them to do it in a low-stakes environment, you know, saying, look, you haven't even learned this. This is just for practice, got them a bit over that hurdle of some of the uncomfortable feelings. So After they've done their initial phone call, which includes 2 scenarios, a scenario in which they deliver good news to the parent and a scenario in which they deliver bad news to the parent, they then do the family engagement overview, and they then next do the Parent-Teacher Conference module. And this is a screenshot of the first page of the Parent-Teacher Conference module. First, they learn about delivering good news and bad news, because as I referenced in the beginning, if they have learned any content, it has pretty much only been the sort of simple sandwich method. And we want them to focus more on a directive communication method in which they still do say something positive about the child, but they don't lead with that. They lead with a more direct method because research has shown that while starting with something positive makes the deliverer feel better, it is not better on the receiver. So that box with the green arrow is walking through that. Next, the 3 teachers in the middle are actual examples of candidates making sample phone calls. And there's a good news example, a bad news example that doesn't go quite as well as it could, and a better bad news example. So they can actually hear a breakdown of peers doing the same exercise they have just heard. And then finally, the evaluations are the last set of boxes you've seen. If they've actually done the phone call, they listen to their own phone call and evaluate it. If they haven't done the phone call, there's a sample phone call for them to listen to and evaluate. So here's a close-up of that delivering good news and bad news. Here's the 3 teachers. And here you can see a close-up of what the breakdown looks like. So the same 7-element sliders, the content up at the top are the clips of each of the 7 elements that they can play to hear how that aspect of the conversation went. And finally, we have the Parent-Teacher Conference module. Now, these can be done independently. So in a semester, you could choose to do parent-teacher conferences, in another semester, parent phone calls. If you do it that way, the Parent-Teacher Conference module should be preceded by the Family Engagement module. So if you haven't just done phone calls, you would want to make sure you started this module with the Family Engagement module. So that one should always be done with one of the other 2 content modules. Here at the top, we get an introduction to both the teacher and the student. We learn about them and the situation, and this is what this looks like. And here we see videos of the meeting. So this is what this looks like. Again, the 7 elements. But this time, when you watch the 7 elements, you're actually watching a video of the Parent-Teacher Conference. And this one is set up slightly different. There's 2 conferences with the same parent-teacher duo. In the first conference, it doesn't go as well. Then she makes some changes, and the second conference goes better. And in both sets of conferences, you get to see both the teacher and the parent reflect on that conference. So you get some insight from both of them. And they have very different views of how it went. Then there is another set of conferences with a different parent, but the same setup. Before each conference, here we can see an assessment. This is going back to the parent phone call assessment, but here we can see in the Parent-Teacher Conference assessment, before the conference, they write a plan for the conference, and then after the conference, they revise and reflect on that conference. So assessments are built in at each step, and you can substitute your own assessments if you want to, or add assessments, but at each stage, there are assessments built in. So the way these are designed is that it's a start to finish package. But if you choose, you can either supplement or make adjustments to them. So if you have things you want to add or things you want to substitute, they're flexible in that way. But it is something that you can use completely as is, either as a homework assignment. Some people have used them when they were going to be out of town and had the candidates do them instead of getting a guest lecturer or something like that. So they're pretty flexible. There are also additional materials that accompany the student website. So there's a faculty handbook that walks faculty through using the modules. And then because the live phone calls require practice parents, volunteers who will act as the parents for the phone calls, there is a training PowerPoint and training materials for those volunteers. So the faculty manual walks through the recruiting and the timeline for those steps, and then the PowerPoint is an actual training for those practice parents. So I'm just briefly, in the next few minutes, going to kind of quickly go over a little bit of excerpt of those practice parent materials, but because this is all in the handbook and online, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because I want to get your questions, and then if there are specific areas you'd like me to go back to, I can do that. But here's an excerpt from the training. So up at the top, where it says play conversation, you can listen to an actual conversation between the practice parent and the candidate, and then it walks you through some of the things going on in that conversation. So here, there was an opening, they shared information, there was asking questions, there were a couple things going on in this part of the conversation. The training follows a set of if-then prompts. So if the candidate does X, then the practice parent should do Y. And you can see this for the opening. So the practice parent is instructed in the beginning to be on guard and not let their guard down until the teacher has won you over. So if the teacher clearly introduces themselves and states the purpose for the call, confirms you have time to talk, reassures you everything is okay, then the parent is instructed to relax, let their guard down, show more friendly tone of voice, etc. But if the teacher does this series of behavior, forgets to introduce themselves, does not explain why they are calling, sort of starts to ramble, just dives into the meat of the conversation, perhaps is aggressive, maybe just doesn't lack confidence, maybe they're rambling, then the parent is instructed to interrupt with, what do you want to talk about today? But there's some other additional guidance, so at this point they shouldn't be too aggressive. They're more concerned. So there's some, behavioral suggestions here. You can see this here. Again, all of this is on the website, so if you can't quite read all of this just yet, it's more to give you a flavor of the structure, this if-then. Because obviously since it's a conversation, it can't be scripted, but it's more, if the teacher does or does not do X, then you do Y. So, a good example, probably the easiest example of this is, if the teacher uses a lot of you language, you should, you did or did not, then the parent becomes withdrawn, if it continues, aggressive. But if the teacher uses we language, we can work on this, we can find a solution, then the parent becomes partnership-oriented, wants to work with the teacher. So that's probably the easiest one to sort of wrap your head around. Included in all of these is obviously the scenario about which the candidate will be calling. And then each of these are designed in a 2-slide version. So the first is kind of the basics. And then the second here gives a lot more information. So here's the first one. The parent is told that they're a mother of a 5th grader. The child excels academically but gets bored. She's tried several times to contact the school, but they focus just on behavioral issues. But she knows her child needs a more challenging environment. So unless the teacher wins her over, that's all the information that she is going to reveal or go on. Now, if the teacher candidate is successful in forming that partnership, there's all this other information the parent has at her disposal. She's divorced. She really loves animals and has a dog grooming business. But she wanted to become a veterinarian, however, she felt she received a lousy education. This is what motivates her to push so hard for her daughter and really be a champion for her. So the parent has all of this information at her disposal, but she will only reveal this information to the teacher candidate if she feels that the teacher candidate has won her over and made her a partner. So this is the way in which the practice parent phone calls are designed to set up. We're right at that half-hour mark, so I'm going to wrap up, and I'm just going to do a little bit of acknowledgement and then take questions. So these are the 7 EPPs that participated in the pilot, and I just wanted to briefly acknowledge them because obviously without their dedication and their work, these final modules would not have been possible. This is my contact information. If you don't already have it and you have any questions, please feel free to reach me. I will leave that up for a little bit. I will actually go back to that slide and leave it up while we talk. But I just wanted one more time to give you the URL for the student-facing website. And if you don't have the URL for the faculty website, it is capenet.org about family engagement. And that is my email, so I'll let it rest on that. And I will now take questions because I would really rather spend time talking about, what your concerns are, your questions are. So to do that, I can either unmute you if you would like to speak, or you can type into the chat box and I can take questions that way. So any questions? Okay. Okay, someone asked, how much preparation does a faculty member need to use the modules? So that's a great question. And the answer is really you need a desire to want to do this and at least an hour and a half per module for the candidate. So they were really designed for what should be a homework assignment. Other than that, I would say you need a bit of time to sit down with the modules and kind of see what your candidates are doing and to read the faculty handbook. But they were designed for someone who may have a desire to teach about this content, but not a background on it, and not the time or resources to go out and design their own curriculum on this. So I would say if that's all you have, that's fine. There are people who are teaching a whole course on this content and using them too. So the goal would be that anyone would now have access to do this because there's certainly an understanding that there are many people who recognize that this is a need, but for whatever reason, often resources just don't have the ability to include this in their curriculum. So now hopefully they can without a tremendous outlay of additional resources. So for the person who asked that question, please let me know if that answered your question, and if not, what other information you would like. Someone asked, how have students responded to the modules? So the reason we actually decided to go ahead and make this, okay, great, she said yes, thanks. So back to the students, the reason we decided to go ahead and make this freely available to basically all EPPs or really to anyone that's on the web is because the pilot candidates were very enthusiastic. So when we got the original Kellogg grant, the end product was not a freely available course. It was, your traditional sort of grant pilot, but the candidates were really enthusiastic and kept asking us to do more and add more, and they had all of these great ideas. And of course, you can't do all of them, but what we were able to do is say, there's a real need for this, and there's a lot of programs that, we think would do more if they had this freely available to them. So why don't we spend year 2 turning this into something that can be used by all EPPs and that is really resource friendly. So that's where this course, this free course came from. So what I will say is there were so many quotes that said things like this from this candidate. We're teachers. We really want to do things that are practical, that are active. We want to get out there and practice. Papers only go so far. So they really responded to the active part of it. And the other thing we were looking for is, were they realistic? Because anytime you do sort of videos, there's the concern that they could be, corny, or they could seem phony. And so we were really testing to see, do these seem realistic? And it was very exciting when we found out they were, which was another reason we decided to go forward. So are there scenarios for parent conferences at different grade levels? I'm particularly interested in early childhood. So the Kellogg funds projects for the K to 6. So our student is a 5th grader to try to capitalize on the largest grade span that we could. We did do a test with high school science teachers to see if they still felt that it applied to them, and fortunately they did. You know, we kind of gave the caveat of the student will be a 5th grader, but all of the skills you'll learn will apply no matter what grade you teach, and that worked just fine. I'm not sure you even really need the caveat, but I don't think it ever hurts. We were not able to have sort of multiple levels of videos, but I didn't find that that actually even mattered, and in fact could have been confusing. You know, just too much. Sort of the more streamlined approach ended up working. I do think that, you know, if you teach in a specific course, you can always go that same approach and say the student you're going to see is in X grade. Remember that what we're really focusing on here is a philosophy. It's, you know, active engagement. It's seeing families as partners. It's learning how to do this, you know, those 7 elements. So to some extent, the actual grade of the child becomes slightly less important. You know, not irrelevant, but slightly less important because it's focusing on those bigger picture things. Does that help? And then, of course, you can supplement. So in the faculty handbook, there is a list of additional resources, and really encouraging to say, you know, because if you're teaching this in a class, you can have class discussion, class debrief. There's some ideas for additional class discussion. So that would be really a great place to make it specific, you know, if you're in a math class or an early childhood class or a special ed class. And I will say that the faculty handbook will get updated one more time before June 30th. So if anyone has an idea for an article or for a class activity or for anything like that, I would love to include some things that you think would be useful for your specific specialty. So please email them to me. Please email ideas to me. You know, I've gotten a couple ideas for really important tweaks from the faculty, you know, using this. So please send them to me. Well, while you're thinking of any other questions, I'm going to go back to this slide that I had inserted here. Let me find it. One moment. Here we go. And just ask, do you anticipate any challenges implementing this project? Is there anything that you think would be important for me to know from your perspective? And then I guess the first question, is there any information or support you would need to make this project successful in your class? And then finally, where would you look for these resources? Someone asked for the faculty link, so I just sent it to you. It's capenet.org about family engagement. Let's see. Do the parents' profiles in the project all come from wait, hold on, sorry. Do the parents' profiles in the project all come from American cultural background? Or are there some parents, students could practice with that come from other cultural or linguistic backgrounds. So in the Parent-Teacher Conference, both mothers are Latinas, but they actually have quite different approaches to family engagement, and that's actually something that is suggested that you draw out more in class discussion. So in the faculty handbook, it talks about that. It's something we tried in this round of modules to draw out even more, but I will say I don't think the students quite still, in quotes, get it as much as they could. So we tried in different activities to pull it out even more this time, but it's something that I think is really best done in a class discussion. So that's addressed in the faculty handbook, but one is more of a school-centered parent. She kind of, her view is more like home is home, school is school, and one is more of a, I'm the mother, I know best. What happened is the parents, the candidates sort of focus on her as being, quote, aggressive, and it's a little too nuanced for them. So they still get a lot from that, but those sort of fine distinctions could really be drawn out even more. There's even more you could work on in terms of, cultural competency, cultural difference in a class discussion, and there are prompts in the faculty handbook for that. So those two women are Latina. The video, I sort of showed you a still of the video in family engagement. That mother is an African-American mother. She happens to be from DC Public Schools. I'm trying to remember what the teachers are. One of them is definitely male. I don't remember their races off the top of my head. But basically, to answer your question, there is a variety. The one thing that is missing is sort of males. It's, they are all mothers. But for the practice parents, you could sub out whomever you wanted. You could certainly even sub out generations and do grandparents, do aunts and uncles. We do use the word parent, but we have a note that by parent we really mean whoever the family member is. It just gets, frankly, linguistically tough to keep saying, guardian or family, or you eventually sort of just need a noun, for better or worse. So yes, we definitely paid attention to that. And I think in class discussion, depending on your population and your area of need, you could make substitutions to further that. Great. Someone said that she is really looking forward to, she's been looking for a way to figure out a way to give her students a real experience, and this sounds like it will provide that. Yeah, please report back. Really hoping to see how that people use this in the real world and how it can help them out. We do have one of our pilot schools in Illinois has really taken this and done sort of next steps with it, and we are looking to write that up and get that out there. But they have done a parent panel. They've even done mock parent-teacher conferences, a whole variety of things. So I think it can sort of stimulate all sorts of great thinking and ideas. Okay, well, I don't want to keep people past the time. I know there's already been one or two people who have said that they needed to get to their next thing. So I'm going to ask if there are any final questions, and then maybe give it another minute or two, but I want to be really conscious of everyone's schedule. At the same time, I'm happy to stay and keep answering questions. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand or write them in. If you do need to get going, please feel free to do so, and you have my email. You can reach out to me via email. I'll give it about 2 more minutes, and if I don't hear another question, I will wrap it up.